Hey guys, this is Andy. This is a trigger wheel. That's a Volvo 1800 ES and an ancient B20 engine. And this is Rust Wars. And this is my war on rust. And I haven't made a YouTube video in some time for various reasons, but I'm going to give this a reboot and structure this new series as more of a vlog where every week or so I'm going to give you a progress report of what exactly I'm working on, such as the trigger wheel, engine stuff, metal fabrication, whatnot, as opposed to trying to wrap things up into individual, nicely self-contained projects. So, anyway, today we are going to talk about trigger wheels and optical distributors and fitting those to an ancient B20 pushrod motor. Okay. Why I'm doing this? So for phase one, I just want all the metal work completely done and painted and running and driving with the original B20E motor. But I'm going with a mildly spicy build, and instead of the original Bosch Digitronic, I'm going with a modern Speeduino ECU, and that of course needs a relatively reliable method of measuring crank angle and ideally cam angle. So let's get to it. So my original plan with the B20 was a crank mounted trigger wheel like so, and I even made a hub to mount that guy along with the harmonic like so, if that fits there, janky ass. But the problem I kept running into with this approach is I couldn't find a clean place to mount the hall sensor. So if I would mount a hall sensor like so, it would be so close to the pulley that in order to change the fan belt, you would have to remove the hall sensor, which was just super janky. They're really, to get the pulley to line up with the alternator, you'd have to keep it here, and then the bulge here on the timing cover prevents me from running a larger trigger wheel. So geometrically, this was the only arrangement. It was just ugly mounting a hall sensor there. Because of various stuff here, the hall wouldn't fit down there, and it would just be really janky down there. So I basically gave up on this approach and decided to go with a distributor mounted trigger. And yes, I totally realized that some people run crank mount, or some people run flywheel mounted triggers, but for reasons I'm not going to go into, that was not a really viable option for here. So my only options were front crank trigger or distributor trigger. Now let's take a look at the original Bosch Digitronic distributor. This has a pair of mechanical contacts here that triggered the batch fire injectors and of course the points and rotor and so forth. This guy has this little slotty thing that is pinned to the drive shaft that fits into the distributor drive gear like so. So this fits into the block via this neat little adapter block like so. And bolts in there. Neat arrangement. Anyway, looked around for an alternate distributor that I could use, and I found this guy. This is out of a Nissan VG30. This is a dual wheel optical distributor, and it originally had this 360 tooth outer optical wheel that. So now let's go into why the original optical 360 tooth wheel wouldn't work well with the Speeduino. In a Nissan, the outputs of the optical sensor go directly into a hardware pulse counter that then feeds a signal into an ECU. Whereas on mine, that's done all in software, where the optical sensor outputs go into the interrupt controller on the AT Mega, and this is a relatively low-powered processor, and the interrupt controller really couldn't keep up with this high of a pulse count, so I had to drop down the tooth count here to give me a more reasonable number. So I'm using 72 teeth at cam speed, which is equivalent to 36 teeth at crank speed, and that's totally fine for the interrupt controller on this. It's better to have a reasonably high tooth count because that gives you a more accurate measure of crank angle, and let's show you why. So the problem with too low of a tooth count, like if I would have made this, say, a 12 tooth or something, that would give a fairly inaccurate measure of crank angle to the distributor. So basically how the ECU works is, if we look at the crank rotating in time, and I drew a little graph here of time and crank angle, the crank shaft is never actually rotating at a constant velocity. Rather, the crank is continually accelerating and decelerating. So even if the engine is running at constant RPM, that crank is accelerating and decelerating all the time. And if we have a limited number of points, so I drew a little exaggerated description of the crank accelerating and decelerating, and if we have a really limited number of trigger pulses, so what the ECU does is it essentially records the previous position and the present position, and it uses that to project forward in time an estimate for crank angle in between the time it gets the next pulse here. And if I have a really low number, that estimate is going to be really inaccurate by the time it gets here. So by the time it gets here, it's going to recalculate that estimate and project it forward there. So if I have, say, 20, 30 some odd degrees here, that's not that, I mean, that could be, you know, 5, 10 degrees off possibly. And having that inaccurate of an estimate for crank angle is going to result in inaccurate timing, which could lead to detonation or various other bad things. So in my opinion, it's best to have as high of a tooth count as your ECU can reasonably decode with its processor. That's why I had a custom-made 72 tooth wheel from Sencut Sen, and yeah, I mean, this literally cost me 13 bucks. And if you guys want a custom wheel, just leave a comment and I'll post the DXF for this somewhere. So yeah. So to mount that Nissan distributor in this Volvo block, let's take a look at how the original Volvo distributor was mounted. It used this adapter block here in this CAD model, and this basically just bolted into the block, and the Volvo distributor just slid right into it. I can't reuse this because the Nissan shaft is a little bit bigger, so I need to make a custom mounting block, and basically I'm just going to copy the pattern, or the flange pattern that bolts in the block, and bore out the hole a little bit larger to fit the Nissan distributor, and create that same mounting bolt so that the Nissan distributor bolts straight to it. So when I finish up that block, this distributor is going to sit right about there, exactly like the original one, except it'll be about a 1/4 inch or so higher up. And then, yeah, because I'm using a coil pack ignition, I'm going to 3D print a plastic cap for this like this, and that'll just cover up these internal workings, and hopefully it should work pretty slick. Alright, so this has been my approach to getting accurate crank and cam angle position to the ECU on an ancient B20 motor. Next episode, and leave me a comment of which one you'd rather see. I might go into how I am modifying the injector bungs to fit modern EV14 injectors, like so, or I might go into some of the metal fabrication that I'm having to do. So, for example, this is a part that I fabricated to fix the rotted out upper inner frame rail here. So I'm going to make another one of these for the other side, and might do that, or like I said, do injectors, or might do something else, depending on what I feel like working on next time. So, okay.